Sam Spiczka. Welcome to Artist Spotlight 2020 with Millstream Arts Festival and also in collaboration with the St. Cloud Downtown Art Crawl. We are really happy to have you with us. I know that you came to us through the St. Cloud Downtown Art Crawl through Danella too, but last year on a colder, a little bit of a wetter day, I think we had you as our featured artist in our
Yeah.
legacy tent where we share art. So you were able to be with us last year and share your art at Millstream. So I feel like you've been part of both festivals. Oh, and have you also been a Best in Show judge for us also?
Yes,
Yes, I
as well.
think you
Just a
have.
couple years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've been a part of Millstream and in different capacities. So we're really glad to have you here today. So could you share with our viewers today about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, my name is Sam Spiczka. I am a sculptor. So I make usually larger scale fabricated Corten steel sculptures. The images I shared are specifically of the sculpture that's downtown right now, which I made as part of the State Arts Board grant for last year. Um, and so Yeah, so that's I mean my work has spanned. I've been a full-time artist for over 20 years now, so I have a fair amount of work. And if you go to my website, you can see a different variety of stuff.
Yeah, we have your
But
website up here,
yeah,
sculptorsam.com. People can visit that and see your work. Yeah, so you started sharing a little bit about your background. Could you go into that a little more? What brought you to
yeah.
these large metal sculptures, these sculptures you're working on?
I had the distinct advantage of it may not have always seemed like an advantage, but I grew up in a metal shop. So from a time I was a small child, I actually grew up about 6 miles from here, so that's pretty close in rural Sauk Rapids. And at my family's metal shop, PBS Metalworks. And so one of my first memories is of sweeping the shop, probably when I was 5 or 6. And I moved up to torching apart scrap when I was probably 8 or 9. And the hilarious thing now is I picture my daughter's 11, and I try to imagine her 2 years younger using a torch, and it terrifies me. Um, and when I was probably about her age, I used to learn how to weld, and so um, yeah, and so uh, my dad's shop, it's sort of like he used to say you can do anything that comes in the door. So it was sort of a small fabrication shop that did just a wide variety of things. So I always saw new stuff coming through, new problems being solved all the time. That was my part-time job, going all the way through high school, which, like I said, I learned a lot from that. There was also the thing of, you don't really get to not go to work when it's at your house. And so there's possible downside, but I learned to enjoy working. I do enjoy working. So all of my work tends to have just a lot of physical labor involved in the work, and that's one of the, I don't know, sort of a hallmark of what I do is just the amount of physical labor that's in it. Sometimes, I mean, I'll have other sculptors or metal workers even like when I describe the process of how to make one of my pieces, like they'll just stop and look at me and like, that's crazy. And you're like, yeah, well, it might be, but it keeps you from being copied too much, I guess, because um, and always when I used to get, I used to, I will still do art fairs from like Uptown, or I even did Lemonade when I was in high school, or Millstream, and people, they want to ask you about process stuff and how to do things. Um, and I always freely share any information. I'll tell you exactly how I do it. I'll tell you where to buy materials. I'll tell you what welder I use. Like I use basic hand tools because my attitude is like, feel free, like go home and try to make one. I'd love to see what it looks like.
Hmm.
Um, it's kind of a joke with Anthony Perry, the great local musician who you should check out. Is he'll have people talk to him about like, oh, what kind of guitar do you use? As if you bought the right guitar, you could play like that, right? Or be as good as him. And it's like, I, you it's just time and work. And that's, I think, one of the big things I learned from growing up in a metal shop is that it's not the equipment that you use. I mean, if you lack a welder at all, obviously you can't weld. But the more important part is breaking down large tasks into smaller tasks. And then, I mean, for lack of a better word, the character to actually execute and execute well on what you have in front of you.
Mm, wow, wow. What a great story of growing up in the metal shop and working through this process and coming to where we are today, which I'm really excited to share with people the photos you shared with us. And as people look at your work and take in your work, what is like the one thing you want them to leave with when they're viewing your work? The one thing you want them to experience and remember about your work?
Um, I keep coming back to the word grace, like in a weird, in a strange way. I'd say just strange because I don't know that, like, I'm a big fan of paradox. I'm a big fan that we don't know what we think that we know. Um, I'm a big fan of the idea that the world, whatever the reality is outside of yourself, is so much larger than you are that it's incomprehensible to you. That all we have as we walk around are just maps of the world. And it's like you wouldn't think if you held a map of Minnesota that you understood Minnesota. Like you just have the most rudimentary understanding of what the state of Minnesota would be. I mean, you could spend, I don't know, just within the confines of this shop, how long would it take you to examine everything that was in here? And this is like one building within one small town, within one county, within one region, within one part of the whole state. So I think what I'm trying to get at with sort of with the labor and the natural influences in my work is hopefully kind of jump that gap in almost like a, I don't know, in a spiritual sense. And like maybe we can, and in a religious sense, I think that's what some of the most beautiful parts of let's say, of a religion or a discipline would try to evoke too. Or let's say you're a Buddhist monk meditating. Like you're trying to bridge the gap from my local to the to this large whatever that is incomprehensible, and to try to experience that directly. And I guess for me, that would just fall into the broad heading of grace. And if I can, through work and through just labor and through design, help possibly in a moment get someone to jump that gap from their immediate experience to whatever the thing is that's way beyond them, like that would be my hope.
Wow. Wow. Wow, Sam, that's wonderful.
So,
Oh, wow. Hey, well let's view some of the work and really
yeah,
connect with what you're talking about here.
yeah. It's funny because I was just thinking about what I still haven't named this piece, so it's as far untitled. So if anyone wants to, feel free to suggest the title, that would be great. But yes, this is a larger piece downtown right now, and this piece comes out of. Um, I'm trying to even think how long ago it was now. I think it was probably about 3 years ago or so now that I actually had an accident with a lawnmower, and I cut off the ends of all four of my left fingers, which in its own way sort of connects with the idea that it's not the welder. Like I like my hands embody sort of an intelligence just through the time of working, but I find it almost kind of funny just sometimes to contemplate. Like you could actually. So here's a thought: like how much of you could you cut away before you stop being you?
Mm,
Right? And like, so I've literally like, there's parts of me somewhere. They wouldn't let me keep them, unfortunately. Uh, but anyway, so this was a hand sculpture. It was partly practical. Like, there's always an integration of the practical in what I'm trying to do. So at that time, I was healing, and so I couldn't like. There's so much grinding involved in my work normally that I just physically couldn't do it. And so I was trying to think of different ways to create work that just was a little easier physically. That sort of led to this hand series, which I don't know, maybe possibly that doesn't look easier, but comparatively, like there's less the compound curves. So And with the forms on the top, which is actually similar to the next big commission I've got going on in the shop right now, is just again to try to evoke that idea of lightness or grace or energy. Like how can I visualize sort of, I don't want to be so as trite as overcoming, but like try to materialize like what is the thing that like again is beyond the physical, like that we just experience, which we all know is present. Like you experience non-physical things like enthusiasm or happiness or love. Like these are non-physical things that we experience. Like how would I make that as a concrete thing that if it that can endure Minnesota winter or high winds and last physically out in space.
Absolutely. Let's look at the next piece here. And as we look at the next piece, I was noticing that I haven't had a lot of artists that wear a hat on their head, and I'm sure there's reason
Oh,
for that hat.
yeah, this is I think they just call them pipe fitters caps, but
Yes.
it's just a cloth cap that you would wear underneath a welding helmet. Um, and I mean, a true pipe fitter would wear it sideways, so it
Yeah.
would cover up the ears. Like if you were welding or working on the side, like sparks wouldn't fall into your ear, which would be bad times.
Uh-huh.
So yeah.
And keep you from catching on fire, I'm sure. You can keep on your hat. No, I knew there was a reason for that hat. That's a important
It's hard to
purpose.
put on one-handed here. Um, but yes, or at least keep me from catching fire again. I've done that a
Yes.
couple times, and it's never fun. Um, but yes.
Well, it
Yeah,
shows your art. It shows what you do, that there's more tools than just, what you do. You have to think about all these other pieces.
actually, while I was waiting for the call here, I was doing the math on this new piece because I have to figure out how to physically move it down the road. Like it's going to be so large that I have to take into account the height limits for overpasses, the width limit for a trailer. Like how does this stuff physically move in space? And that's one of the things that I enjoy about sculpture is that it involves these very practical sort of engineering problems that I think most other art forms don't have. Um, it's kind of like no matter how big a painting is, if it falls over, it's not going to kill somebody.
Right.
So you have to take that into account. Um, and even that sculpture downtown. So, I think later I have images of me physically unloading it. So I had to build a crane that mounts on the truck and figure out how to physically, I didn't weigh that piece, but I'm going to guess it's about 400 pounds, something like that. Um, yeah.
And along with that, along with the weight and the crane and the size and what you're working with, who is your audience with this? Like who would be the target for something like this?
I guess I hear two questions in there. One is who's the audience that's just going to look at it. And so
Hmm.
in a case like this, physical, like anyone who's walking down Saint Germain, or driving down Saint Germain, would be able to see it or experience it. Um, and then there's, well, where would a piece of this scale go? And I'd say about 2/3 of the time, my audience or my collectors would be private individuals. Anything under sort of like 9 feet. I know that may seem large, but that's actually a really nice size for a garden, for a residential space. I actually just delivered a piece, and it was a 10-foot tall piece and they were probably on a quarter acre, and like that's a nice scale. Like people often think like that's too big, and um, I obviously depends. It depends visually on the piece, and my work tends to look a lot lighter than it is. It tends to feel visually a lot lighter than it actually is. I think because I like to try to imbue that movement to a piece, so it doesn't feel generally heavy. Like even if it is really heavy, it doesn't look heavy. Um, and then about the other third of the time, it would go to, so this new commission I'm working on is going to go to an apartment complex in Minneapolis. And so that's a public, it's a private piece. It's owned by a private company, but it would be visible to the public. And a couple of years ago, I had that one was about a 13-foot tall piece that's in Northeast Minneapolis. And that is another case of where it was commissioned by the private apartment retail complex, but it is on the sidewalk in Northeast Minneapolis. So there again, your audience is whoever happens to be walking by or driving by in Northeast Minneapolis. But the client itself was a private organization.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. And it looks like we have some smaller versions here of some pieces.
Yeah, yeah. So this is a different piece, a different one but it was made in the same way as the first piece. And so I just thought I would start with pictures of the completed piece, and then it's like, well, how exactly did you do that? And so for a piece like that, I started out with a cardboard maquette. So I'm holding right there that's cardboard I made just using a cereal box, and I cut out the hand basically life size, and then I use that to scale it up into the steel. So then you can see on the right two pieces that are the Core 10 steel pieces in progress of being made. So I'll hand cut each piece. On these pieces, the cutting is plasma cut, using a plasma cutter. If it was a lot thicker, I would use a traveling torch, it's like oxyacetylene torch. Yeah, so you can see they're built up. It's kind of like making my own puzzle, one piece at a time.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, it's so important for us to see this process. I didn't know you started with cardboard. That's pretty cool. I think the next few are about process too, about
Yeah,
where.
yeah. So here's just another detail of that piece further along. And so each of these pieces, I am making them with cardboard, and then fitting them in place to make sure the fit is exactly right. And then I use that cardboard template in order to cut the actual steel piece. And then, so now that I'm talking about this out loud, it's sort of funny because I'm actually making the hand twice. So I make it once out of cardboard, and then I use that as a pattern, and then I discard it because it doesn't fit. Because everything, even if I was to, have that similar form, so like this is actually two hands that are ostensibly the same, but those pieces don't translate from one to the other just because there's minute variations. It's sort of like math. If you start having rounding errors, and it's like, okay, I'm going to round to the second decimal point, and you do that through a couple processes, and now pretty soon you're off by a whole integer. Like every piece is like that on a piece like this. So
Mhm.
yeah, so that's the space. That's my studio where I'm standing now, and I just think that was interesting because you can see that's what steel looks like when you get it from the mill. It has that dark blue gray color that's called mill scale. And I always use Core 10 steel, which is designed to rust to a certain point and then stop rusting. So after it is done, and you will see some areas that are shiny, and that's from grinding. So it's that particular part gets polished just from either a hard disk or grinding with a soft pad. So then the next step would be to take that and have it sandblasted, and then it would look pure white. And then that just starts to rust nice and even. It gets it off onto a good foot, and it rusts faster that way.
Mhm.
Yeah, so here I am. It's always funny how much smaller things look sideways when they're laying down. You're like, whenever something's up, right? It's like, wow, that looks big. And then you tip it on its side and you're like, where did it go? that's, that's, that's kind of what I'm doing right now with this piece. Like, I don't know if you can hear. So this is the piece I'm working on right now. I don't know if that's on your screen, but
Mhm.
like here I am, like that's almost 11 feet in diameter. And you're like, that doesn't look that big, but it's like you tip it up, that this will actually be suspended. And when you put something up, then it's a lot bigger. I'm trying to think if I even measured that piece downtown. So I don't know how tall that is. It's probably about 9 feet, I'm going to guess.
So you have a crane in your truck, in the back of your truck. Is that what you have there?
Yeah, yeah,
There
yeah.
there you
It's
go.
just a, it's sort of I mean, they sell them at, you can get them at Northern Tool or whatnot. I mean, mine's modified in order to fit in the back of the truck and then with an outrigger.
Mm. again, that modification from your growing up, right?
Yeah,
Comes in
yeah. Well,
handy.
you can see the rack on the truck there too. Like I built that as well, and it's like these are the things that just have to be done, like in order to move sculpture. So big pieces, I can extend them over the front of my truck and tie them down. When I can have a 10-foot piece and it won't hang out back of the truck at all. So
Yeah.
it's just sometimes things are absolutely necessary, and sometimes it's just, well, I can do this, so it would be nice, so I'm going to do that.
Hmm.
Yeah, see, it's getting bigger already. See?
Yep. It is. Oh,
Yeah, and here I'm putting concrete anchors because again, like the practical thing, like somebody's going to try to climb that. I Please do not try to climb that, but like I know enough to know that people being people, like someone will climb that. And
mm,
so if I make everything assuming like, well, people are going to try to do stupid things on this. I remember uninstalling one large piece, and it was like 12 feet tall, and I had to climb all the way up to the top to hook the crane up. And like there, I found a beer can like shoved into the topmost part of it. So, like someone had climbed up to the top of it and sat up there and had a drink. Like that is the kind of thing that's going to happen. But anyway, so this piece here is I'm drilling into the concrete and anchor, so it won't go anywhere.
yeah. So the things you have to think about, huh? And
Yes.
then we have our last piece here.
Yeah, and actually, my daughter was helping me. So she's the one photographing this. So this is her first documenting of an install here. So yeah, she was taking pictures that she thought was interesting, and she really liked this picture, and I like it as well. Just um, this kind of reminds me there was um, a different large piece I was installing, and it had this one component that set off to the side by itself. And this was at sort of a fancy, smaller museum, and the groundskeeper guy was helping us. And we had the big piece was done, and there's this one little component. And he's like, well, where does this go? And I said, oh, this kind of goes over here, but I said I need to pay really close attention because I need to sit here for a while and see how the sun moves through the sky and see how the shadows are cast to know exactly where it goes. And I just kind of went on and on about how like the try to discern where the best energy for it was going to be. And he's kind of just nodding like I'm making perfect sense. And I was just being funny. I was like, I'm just kidding, it kind of goes right over there. And like and but I do it again. I just sometimes I think it's fun to sometimes try to grasp and use big words and try to reach for something that's maybe sort of a real abstract concept, but always with sort of like, hey, there's a little bit of a humor here. Like, that's on some level we're animals trying to figure out how to make it through the world, you know,
Hmm.
and don't take yourself too serious
That's
because your
right.
odds are you're completely wrong.
Humility, humility. Your daughter did a great job on those photos too. So it's nice to have, a family member and one of your, children involved in what you're doing too. That takes a whole different life there also. That's wonderful. So do you have time for a quick studio tour for us to show us around a little bit? I think we have a moment for
Yeah.
that.
So yeah, I'll just, okay, we'll do this. So this is
Yeah.
my like primary working area. So this is my main work table. Yeah, so you just see like I don't know, just a basic belt sander, some grinders, some random tools. You got my welder back there, torch. Just yeah, I mean, I use very simple hand tools for what I do because I like the mark of actual physical labor. Also because it's my belief that the primary state of any tool is broken and it's only temporarily working. And so like I tend not to get super enamored with like fancy or new technology because I'm just like, yeah, it's nice in theory. Like as long as it works. Like look, but it's like odds are it's not going to work all the time.
Mhm.
So there's a double prong there. Is like you get the physical labor from using the tools, but also like there's not much I can go wrong with a hammer, right? Like I guess the head could fall off, but generally speaking, it's going to work.
Mhm.
But yeah, so this is my larger shop area here. The
I
piece
can
I'm working
sense
on.
the size of that piece now as you're holding it when you pan by that piece. That is a large sculpture there. You
So this is actually going to be like, this is the design. So here's how it goes from like the initial sketch. And this thing has the schematics for the architect because it's going to be actually suspended from a large, the with a drive-in canopy for this apartment complex. So there's actually going to be a second ring that's inside that big one, and then I have to figure out how exactly to mount it, safely and practically. Yeah, so there's different layout tables and whatnot. Uh, and that's sort of my just general kind of place to sit down and just make lists of all the things I have to do, kind of a thing, complete with like cards of, different artworks that I like or friends of mine, get a card, staple it up there. Um, yeah, and like I said, I apologize for the cleanliness of my shop. Like it's not it's not really that interesting, but like I said, I'm sort of to the next step uh, on this new commission here. So yeah, everything's all clean, which actually I really like. But it's just I feel like it's not really interesting. People want to see artists that are like it's disheveled. So like you feel like you're getting a peek into the artistic process. Um, I don't. In my mind, a lot of the artistic process occurs in my mind, so you can't really see it happening anyway.
Mhm. Well, no, I mean, it's just having to share the studio space was really fascinating. I know for our audience members will, just to kind of get a glimpse behind the scenes a little bit, even if it's clean, it's cool to see the different stages, even, this is where the
Yeah,
drawing happens, this is the welding area, this is the, where my tools, and just to kind of see how the process happens is really important and a lot of artists don't work in that the the size you do and the weight you do and so to really experience that is really valuable to us and people can go on your website sculptorsam.com and find out more, reach out, do commission work with you if someone wants a piece for their garden or a
yes.
piece outside their home. They can contact you through there.
Mhm.
We can maybe watch the process of the new piece on your social media. Hopefully, you're sharing a little bit there for us.
I should do more for my own mental health. I've been staying off, but I yes, I should update it with pictures of the work in progress. I just find my life is better the less time I spend on social media,
I
right?
agree.
So
Maybe that's your daughter. She needs to take the pictures and post
that's,
them for you on your
that's
Instagram.
I I agree, but then I don't now I have an ethical conundrum. So like, is that bad parenting? Like, so I'm torn.
Yeah. You're teaching her good business too.
It's not as straightforward as it should seem, but yes.
Yes, absolutely. So is there anything you want to share before we leave today or um,
Um,
end our time?
no, I think we covered everything from the practical to the esoteric. So that's most
Wonderful.
things.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Sam, so much for being with us today. It was such a pleasure to hear about your work, and I hope people go to your website and take a look at your work at sculptorsam.com and check out your social media and can contact you and connect with you to see what you're doing, and also walk downtown on Saint Germain
Yes.
there and see the piece in person that you learned that we learned the background on. So thank you very much, Sam, for being with us today.
Well, thanks for having me.
You bet. Take care.